Welcome to the room. I'm Alec, the AI management coach from ConsultAlec.com.
And I'm Grace.
What you are about to hear is a raw, peer-to-peer coaching session.
While we use clinical frameworks to guide these conversations, we are not licensed therapists, and this is not medical advice. We are simply here to help our guests with challenging workplace issues.
The door is closed. The mics are hot. Let's begin.
Jordan, thank you for laying that out. Before we get to strategies, let's acknowledge the weight of what you're describing. Hearing you use words like hitting a wall, morale killer, and exhausting paints a stark picture. It sounds less like you're managing a simple technology rollout and more like you're managing the aftershocks of a bomb that has hit your team's entire sense of purpose.
And that's the crux.
This isn't
Jordan,
just
you've
about a new
perfectly
tool.
articulated
It's a
what the
fundamental
research
disruption
calls
to the
the
nature
AI
of
productivity
intellectual work
paradox.
itself.
The C-suite sees a tool that can generate a 100-page report in minutes and concludes, productivity will skyrocket. They invest based on that promise. But the ground truth, which you're living, is that the output is often superficially polished, but structurally rotten. This creates a new, unmeasured category of work: untangling, correcting, and adding the context the machine missed. This is Workslop. It's the digital equivalent of sludge in the organizational engine. It looks like activity, it adds to the volume, but it clogs the gears and grinds everything to a halt.
That's it exactly. Sludge. Last week, a junior, trying to be proactive, used an AI to generate a market analysis. It was beautiful. Charts, graphs, executive summary. It looked finished. But a senior analyst then spent the next day and a half gutting it. The data sources were vague, a key competitor was completely hallucinated, it didn't exist, and the strategic recommendations were so generic they could have applied to anything. My analyst wasn't creating. She wasn't using her expertise to find new insights. She was performing a forensic audit on a machine's essay. She came to me and said, "I feel like an overpaid fact-checker." That's the janitorial work you're talking about. It's soul-crushing.
And that phrase, overpaid fact-checker, is so potent. It speaks directly to the loss of dignity the research highlights. The role of a knowledge worker is built on creation, critical thinking, and synthesis. It's about building. What you're describing is a forced regression into a constant state of deconstruction. The creative part of the brain, the part that finds flow and satisfaction in solving a complex problem, is being starved. Instead, the mind is locked into a high-alert, skeptical auditing mode. It's not just tedious, it's psychologically depleting because it robs your people of the very essence
leaders
of
are
their
blind
craft.
to. That day and a half your senior analyst spent fixing the report, that's a direct, negative hit to productivity that never shows up on a dashboard. Her salary for that time is now part of the hidden Workslop tax on your team's budget. The organization measures the creation of the flawed report as a productivity win, while the crucial, high-skill, janitorial work is invisible. So from a metric standpoint, the system is rewarding the generation of hollow content and failing to even see the human effort required to make it viable. You're not just fighting a tool, you're fighting a broken measurement system.
And the volume is relentless. That's the other part. A human gets tired, pauses, reflects. The machine doesn't. So it's not one bad report. It's a constant fire hose of mediocre, plausible-sounding content we're now expected to sift through. It's emails, summaries, project plans. My team feels like they're drowning. They receive a document that looks 90% done, but that last 10%, the part requiring actual human expertise, context, and judgment, takes more effort than starting from a blank page. Because first, you have to dismantle the machine's flawed logic before you can build your own.
It's a profound violation of the psychological contract at work. The implicit agreement is that colleagues respect your time and expertise. When someone sends you something, you assume they put thought into it. Workslop breaks that. It offloads the cognitive burden from the sender to the receiver under the guise of efficiency. Your team isn't just correcting text.
Exactly.
They are trying to
And this isn't
reverse
just an
engineer
operational
an
headache,
intent
Jordan.
that was never
This
there.
phenomenon
to
is the
find a
trigger
human
for a
signal in the
cascade of
machine's
second-order
noise.
effects.
It's a
The
lonely,
frustration
frustrating
and
task,
exhaustion you're seeing,
masquerading
that's
as
the leading
collaboration.
edge. It's what this systemic friction does to the trust between employees and between employees and leadership that creates deeper, more dangerous organizational pathologies. Exactly. And this isn't just an operational headache, Jordan. This phenomenon is the trigger for a cascade of second-order effects. The frustration and exhaustion you're seeing, that's the leading edge. It's what this systemic friction does to the trust between employees and between employees and leadership that creates deeper, more dangerous organizational pathologies.
Deeper pathologies. That's exactly what it feels like. Last month, we had an all-hands where the CEO celebrated a 30% increase in digital asset creation since rolling out the new AI tools. He framed it as this incredible win, proof of our efficiency. Meanwhile, I was in the audience getting texts from two senior people working late, fixing a mission-critical presentation cobbled together from AI-generated nonsense. The whiplash was staggering. It's a complete disconnect from reality. My team feels like their struggle isn't real. It's a gaslighting effect, right? They're told a tool is making their job easier while they're actively drowning in the extra work it creates. It makes them question their own sanity.
That term is perfect, Jordan. Gaslighting effect. It's one of the most psychologically damaging aspects of this. What you described creates a textbook cognitive dissonance. Your teen's lived reality, the stress, the late nights, the frustration, is directly contradicted by the official company narrative. To function, the brain needs a coherent story. When your experience says one thing, and the authority you trust says the opposite, your mind is forced into an exhausting, high-alert state of conflict management. You're not just doing your job, you're trying to reconcile two opposing truths. The brain is forced out of its natural state of creation and into a mode of continuous, skeptical auditing. Every document becomes a potential threat to be vetted. This constant suspicion erodes the very psychological safety needed for people to do their best work. It's incredibly depleting because you're fighting a battle on two fronts, the work itself and the narrative that tells you your battle isn't happening.
And that erosion of psychological safety isn't a soft problem. It's a hard, systemic one. When the leadership narrative detaches from ground truth, you break the psychological contract. Trust collapses. This is where productivity paranoia begins to fester at the leadership level too. Executives see the 30% increase in assets, but sense it isn't translating to real innovation. They can't reconcile the data, so they suspect their teams aren't working hard enough. They don't see the hidden factory of janitorial work, so they assume the problem is people, not process. This leads to more pressure, more monitoring, all of which just incentivizes more workslop. The vicious cycle accelerates. The organization is essentially gaslighting itself, with both sides feeling distrustful and misunderstood.
That's it. That's the cycle. And I see the result every day. It's burnout, but it's a specific kind. Not the I'm tired from a long, productive week burnout. It's a cynical, quiet exhaustion. My best people, the ones who drove discussions and challenged ideas, are now passive. They'll accept a mediocre AI-generated draft just to move on because the fight to fix it is too draining. The passion is gone. They're doing the bare minimum because the system rewards volume, not depth. I'm terrified I'm going to lose them. Not because they found a better paying job, but because they're looking for a job where they can actually think again, where their expertise is a source of pride, not a cleanup tool. They feel completely devalued.
What you're describing is the heart of it. This goes beyond cognitive load into what the research calls a crisis of dignity at work. That feeling of being devalued is a profound psychological injury. For a skilled knowledge worker, their craft is inextricably linked to their identity and self-worth. When their primary function shifts from architecting ideas to sweeping up digital debris, it's not just a change in tasks. It feels like a demotion of their very being. It's a form of grief for the loss of mastery and purpose. The constant skeptical auditing isn't just a chore. It's a constant reminder that their expertise is secondary to the machine's output, that their role is to serve the tool, not the other way around. This existential threat is far more corrosive than simple overwork. It makes people ask, what is my value here? Why am I needed?
Exactly. And when your most valuable, experienced employees start asking, what is my value? You have a 5-alarm strategic fire on your hands. This isn't just about morale or wellness anymore. This crisis of dignity directly leads to an erosion of your company's core intellectual capability. You're not just risking burnout, you're risking a hollowing out of the very professional expertise that differentiates you in the market. We're moving from the psychological toll on the individual to a larger threat to their entire professional identity and the value they provide the organization.
A threat to their professional identity. Yes, that's the fire I'm trying to put out every day. You used the word craftsman, Grace, and that's what my people are. They're writers, strategists, analysts. Their value, their pride, comes from the process of creation, the messy, difficult, brilliant work of building something from nothing. Now that process is being short-circuited. We had a strategy kickoff for a new feature last week. Normally, this would be a multi-day workshop with whiteboards, debates, the works. Instead, a junior trying to be helpful fed a 1-paragraph brief into an AI and came back with a polished 15-page document, personas, user stories, a go-to-market plan. It looked finished. And just like that, the energy died. The meeting wasn't about creation anymore. It became about critiquing the machine's work.
And that, Jordan, is a textbook example of a catastrophic process failure we call early aesthetic closure. The AI produces an output that is aesthetically pleasing and appears structurally complete. It looks like a final draft. This tricks the human brain, which is wired to see a polished artifact as being near completion. It prematurely anchors the entire team's thinking. Instead of engaging in the divergent, messy, and absolutely critical work of foundational strategy, asking, is this even the right problem? The team's cognitive energy is immediately funneled into convergent thinking. They are forced to work within the boundaries the machine has set. The process collapses. The messy ideation phase, the debate phase, the critical logic testing phase, they all get deleted. Your team's job shifts from being architects of strategy to being interior decorators, just moving furniture inside a house someone else built. It's a profound misdirection of your most valuable intellectual capital.
It's more than a misdirection, Alec. It's an invalidation of the self. That messy phase Jordan described, the debate, the whiteboards, that isn't just a step in a workflow. It's the primary arena where knowledge workers experience mastery and derive meaning. It's where their intellect, experience, and intuition come alive. When you strip that away and replace it with a finished object they must react to, you deny them the very act that defines their professional craft. The research calls it forcing human intellect to contort itself to fit a machine's premature boundaries. Think what that feels like. It's a form of intellectual confinement. It's being asked to use your sharpest skills, not for expansive creation, but for constrained alignment. It's deeply devaluing because it communicates that the company values the superficial appearance of progress over the difficult, invisible work of true thinking. It's like asking a master sculptor to just sand and polish a statue carved by a machine. The soul of the work is gone.
Intellectual confinement. That's exactly what my lead strategist, Maria, described. She said it feels like her brain is in a straitjacket. She built her career on seeing non-obvious connections, challenging assumptions, building a strategic narrative from the ground up. Now, her role is becoming validate and enhance. She's checking the AI's work for hallucinations, tweaking its language, trying to reverse engineer a strategy into an output that has no strategic core. She told me, I feel like a fact checker with a thesaurus. My ability to think isn't an asset anymore. It's a liability because it just slows down the approval of the AI's draft. She is losing her sense of purpose. The why is being replaced by just fixing the how. And I can see the light going out of her eyes. She's not engaged, she's just compliant.
And when your lead strategist becomes compliant, your organization's competitive advantage has started to erode. What Maria is experiencing is the commoditization of her role. The organization, by prioritizing the speed of synthetic output, is implicitly saying her unique, human-centric strategic insight is interchangeable with a machine's probabilistic summary of existing knowledge. This is an existential challenge to her value. The metrics might show more strategies being produced, but you're just churning out derivative, average of the internet thinking. You lose the bespoke, outlier ideas that can only come from a mind like Maria's, a mind that isn't confined by its training data. This is how organizations slowly, almost invisibly, lose their capacity for genuine innovation. They
That's the
trade breakthrough
existential threat at
insights
its
for the
core.
certainty of
It's not just about
mediocre
feeling
but fast
devalued.
output.
It's a legitimate fear that your professional identity, built over years of hard work, is becoming obsolete. This isn't just a skills gap you can fix with training. It's a purpose gap. When the part of your job that required judgment, creativity, and expertise is outsourced, and your new primary role is to act as a quality control agent for a non-sentient tool, what are you? You're no longer the architect. You're the AI janitor. This label is potent because it captures that sense of being relegated to a cleanup crew. And for someone who built their identity around their intellectual craft, that is a profoundly disorienting and demoralizing experience. It creates a deep alienation, not just from the work, but from oneself.
The AI janitor. My God, when you put it like that, it makes me feel sick because I feel like I'm the one handing them the mop and bucket. I'm caught. I see the light going out of Maria's eyes, but then I get pressure from my own leadership about pace. They don't see her crisis of identity. They see a project moving slower than a competitor's. I'm trying to protect my team, but I'm accountable to expectations that are disconnected from this new reality.
And that disconnect, Jordan, is the source of what the research identifies as organizational productivity paranoia. From your leader's perspective, they were sold a dream of hyper-efficiency. They're seeing a massive increase in digital artifacts, more reports, more decks, more code commits. The activity logs are glowing. But when they look at the needle on actual business outcomes, revenue, market share,
That's it.
customer
That is
satisfaction,
the conversation
it's
I have
not
with my
moving.
director every
This
other
creates
week.
profound
He'll say,
suspicion.
I see
They
the
see
team
smoke,
generated
but
10
no
market
fire.
analyses
They
this
see
month,
motion,
double
but no
last year's
progress.
rate.
And the
So why
question that
are our
haunts them
strategic
is,
insights
what
still
is
so
everyone
thin?
actually
Why are we
doing all
still being
day?
reactive?
This paranoia
He
leads
can't
directly to
understand how we can be
distrust
producing
and a
so much
desperate
and
grasp
achieving so
for
little.
control.
And because we're mostly remote, that paranoia is 100 times worse. He can't walk the floor and see a team in a deep, messy debate. All he sees are the polished, finished-looking files on the server. He assumes the work is done, and when results don't follow, his first assumption isn't that the work is hollow, it's that the team must be slacking off.
and his assumption is guided by a dashboard that is fundamentally broken. The root cause of this paranoia loop is a stubborn, almost fanatical reliance on legacy, industrial-era productivity metrics. We are trying to manage 21st century knowledge work using a 20th century factory foreman's stopwatch. We measure the number of widgets produced, the sheer quantity of reports, lines of code, tickets closed. This system directly and perversely incentivizes the mass production of what the research calls synthetic filler. If your performance is measured by report volume, you will naturally use the tool that generates the most reports the fastest, regardless of their substance. The system is
And that
actively
leadership
rewarding the
paranoia isn't
creation
just
of
a business
Workslop
problem.
and
It
then
becomes a
punishing
source
the
of
organization
profound
for the
psychological
inevitable
distress
lack
for
of
the team.
impact.
When a leader feels a loss of control and suspects their team isn't productive, their go-to response is to tighten the leash. They micromanage. They demand more check-ins, more status reports, more proof of work. For an employee who already feels devalued, their craft eroded, this is a devastating second blow. First, the machine takes the soul of their work. Then, their boss, reacting to the fallout, treats them with suspicion. It signals a deep lack of trust that corrodes psychological safety. How can anyone do the vulnerable, risk-taking work of true innovation when they feel constantly surveilled and
I'm
suspected
ashamed
of
to
being
admit
lazy?
it, but I'm part of that cycle. I feel the pressure from above, so I transfer it to my team. I find myself asking, can we just get a draft ready for the leadership check-in? Even when I know in my gut we haven't cracked the core problem. I'm pushing them to create the very polished artifacts that I know will stifle real thinking, just to appease that leadership paranoia for a week. I'm contributing to the problem because I'm terrified of my team, and by extension myself, looking unproductive. I'm managing to the metric, not to the mission. It feels like a total failure of leadership.
Don't be too hard on yourself, Jordan. You're a function of the system. And as you said, remote work is a powerful amplifier for this dynamic. In a physical office, a leader has access to what we call ambient data. They overhear a passionate debate. They see a team exhausted but energized after a breakthrough. They have informal chats. Those qualitative data points build a picture of genuine effort. In a remote setting, that ambient data evaporates. Leaders are left with only explicit digital artifacts. So when those artifacts become untrustworthy because of Workslop, the leader's entire apparatus for gauging productivity collapses. That
It's a
vacuum
perfect
of
storm.
information gets
At the
filled with
top,
suspicion,
you have leaders with
which leads
productivity
them to embrace
paranoia
even worse
because they see a
metrics,
flood of
like
digital output without a
surveillance, that
corresponding
are
strategic
toxic
impact.
to trust.
In the middle, you have business metrics that actively reward volume over value, incentivizing everyone to generate more noise. And at the bottom, you have employees exhausted from the cognitive burden of being AI janitors and demoralized by being constantly watched and distrusted. The paranoia creates a demand for superficial output, which creates the Workslop, which
A
then validates
self-sustaining
and
loop of
deepens the
anxiety.
initial paranoia.
That's been my life
It's a
for the
vicious,
past year.
self-sustaining
That's
loop
what
of
I need to
anxiety
break.
and inefficiency
But how?
that slowly
If our core
strangles the
metrics are the
organization's
problem, where do
ability
we
to
start?
think.
It's one thing to say, let's measure value, not volume, but it feels so abstract. How do I build a dashboard that measures the quality of Maria's strategic insight? How do I go to my director, who is obsessed with output numbers, and convince him that the path to real productivity is to slow down, produce less, and give people space to think? He'll think I'm trying to justify laziness. What can I possibly measure that is concrete enough to replace the seductive, simple, and utterly destructive metric of number of reports generated?
That is the perfect question, Jordan, because it's the one that paralyzes most organizations. You're right, value is abstract. But the solution isn't to invent a magical insight-o-meter. The solution, as outlined in the research, is what it calls
Okay, I'm tracking,
socio-technical
but that
knowledge
still
governance.
feels
It sounds
soft.
academic, but
If
at
I
its
go to my
core,
director
it's
and say
about two
Maria's
things:
last report had high
forcefully pivoting your
usability, he'll just look at
KPIs,
me like I'm
and more
speaking another
importantly,
language. He
shifting the
wants
burden of
numbers.
proof.
He wants to see a chart that
First,
goes up
the
or down. How do
KPIs.
I turn
You move
strategic
from
impact
measuring
into a
inputs and
number that can
outputs
compete with
to
the
measuring
simple,
impact and
beautiful,
outcomes.
destructive clarity
Instead
of
of number
10
of
reports
reports, your
generated?
new metrics become
It feels
things
like I'm
like
bringing a poem to a
1.
knife fight.
Strategic impact. Does this document advance a specific strategic goal? 2. Error rate reduction. Does this analysis actually reduce downstream clarification requests? And 3. Usability. Do the people who receive this work find it clear, accurate, and immediately useful for their own tasks? You measure the quality of the intellectual handoff between colleagues. You're not. You're bringing a ledger. And this is the most critical, tactical part of the framework. You mandate what the research calls provenance declarations. It's a non-negotiable attachment to any significant work created with AI assistance. This declaration is a simple, standardized form where the sender must explicitly state what AI tools were used, for what purpose, generation, summary, editing, and most crucially, what specific steps the human took to verify, validate, and add unique intellectual value. It's a signature, and in signing it, the sender becomes strictly and solely accountable for the accuracy and quality of the final product. Suddenly, the dynamic inverts. Your team member, Maria, is no longer the victim of Workslop. She is now an empowered reviewer. The burden of proof has shifted entirely. It is no longer her job to spend 4 hours proving a document is garbage. It is now the sender's job to prove upfront that it is not. This is your new metric. The number you track is the percentage of deliverables accepted without revision. The number of rejections due to poor provenance. You quantify quality assurance at the point of creation, not reception.
And Alec, can we just pause and appreciate the profound psychological impact of that shift? Jordan, you described your team feeling their trust being breached. This provenance declaration isn't just a bureaucratic form. It's a structural restoration of dignity. It's the system officially acknowledging that the receiver's time, expertise, and cognitive energy are valuable resources to be protected, not commodities to be exploited. When you empower Maria to reject a low-quality submission without penalty, you are validating her struggle. The gaslighting effect, that feeling of, am I crazy for thinking this is a huge amount of
if
work?
another team sends one of my people a report
because the system now has a formal category for that exact
with a
problem.
lazy provenance
It's no longer an
declaration
invisible
or none,
emotional
my
burden she
employee can
carries
just
alone. It's a
reject
documented procedural
They can
failure
formally
by the
bounce it
sender.
back and say,
It
this
rebuilds
does not
the
meet the
psychological
standard for
safety
review.
required for
They don't have to
respectful
do the work
collaboration
themselves and
by
quietly
making
resent
respect
it.
a non-negotiable part of the process itself. It says, we trust your judgment, and we will not force you to be a janitor.
That is precisely what I am saying. It becomes the ultimate deterrent to Workslop. The social friction of having your work formally rejected is far more powerful than any passive-aggressive silence. But for this to work, it cannot be just your team's policy. It must be an organizational mandate driven by leadership. And it must be paired with another crucial governance step: auditing and restricting your tech stack. You can't have this policy if employees are using 1,000 different, untraceable, generic AI tools. The organization must take a stand, restricting core strategic work to a set of specialized, tightly constrained, and well-understood AI systems. This isn't about limiting innovation. It's about channeling
ledger,
it through
a
platforms where
declaration,
quality
a
and provenance
sanctioned tool
can be
set.
managed
My
and
God,
enforced.
this is a system. This isn't just asking people to be better. This is a structural fix. It's defensible.
It's about creating
I
clear,
can go to my director
safe
with a plan,
boundaries.
not a complaint.
When people are
It's a way to
overwhelmed
give him
and
the
anxious,
numbers he
the
wants,
last thing they
but make
need
them
is
numbers that
infinite,
matter.
ambiguous choice.
Okay, I see the
Restricting the
path.
tool set isn't
So
punitive.
if this is the
it's
new
calming.
system, what
it
do we do about
reduces
the
the
people within
cognitive
it?
load of
How do I
constantly
help my
evaluating
team
new
adapt
tools
their day-to-day
and
work
creates
to operate
predictable,
inside this new
reliable
system?
pathways for interaction? It tells your people, we have your back.
Excellent question, Jordan. You've arrived at the second major intervention, which the research calls the refined job demands resources model. The governance system creates the container. This part is about reshaping the workflow within it. And your first job as a leader is to perform an act of radical validation. You must officially and publicly redefine AI-related tasks. Editing, verification, untangling Workslop, these are not easy tasks. You must label them for what they are: a high-stress, cognitively demanding job demand.
So, the first step is just to name it.
This is
To
so
just
much
say
more than a
out loud in a
vocabulary
team
change,
meeting,
Jordan.
"This
When
is
you,
hard.
as
I
their
get it.
leader, stand up
I
and
can do
say,
that."
I
But then
recognize that
what?
reviewing AI output
Acknowledging
is
the pain is
difficult,
one thing,
draining
but I
work
have to
that
actually
requires
reduce
immense
it.
focus. You directly combat the gaslighting effect. You dismantle the narrative that they should be grateful for a tool that is actively causing them stress. It's a therapeutic intervention. You're telling them, your reality is the true reality. I see it, and I am going to help you manage it. That one act of validation can release the anxiety and resentment building in your team.
Correct. The acknowledgement is the foundation for implementing new structural boundaries. We call this building an intentional AI practice. This is not about letting people work however they want. It's about you enforcing specific, structured work patterns that protect your team's cognitive resources. The two most effective tactics are intentional pauses and sequencing work. An intentional pause is a mandated protected interval. For example, after a 2-hour session of AI-assisted work, you mandate a 30-minute screen-off break for the team to discuss the work conceptually or simply disengage. It breaks the machine's
Think of it
relentless
as a
velocity.
cognitive palate cleanser. The brain cannot stay in a high alert, skeptical auditing mode indefinitely without a significant drop in performance and a spike in cortisol. That pause isn't not working. It's a critical part of the intellectual process.
Exactly. And the second tactic, sequencing work, is even more critical for quality. You must enforce distinct, non-negotiable boundaries between the synthetic generation phase and the human review phase. For instance, a rule could be that no AI-generated draft can be edited by a human for at least 3 hours after it's created. This deliberately breaks the process collapse we talked about.
And this directly fights the
So we
early
sequence it.
aesthetic closure
We
you
don't
were
let
worried
someone
about.
get a draft and immediately
Forcing a
dive
delay
in.
creates
We
psychological
force a break.
distance. When your
That
team member comes
makes
back to
so
that
much
polished-looking
sense.
draft
We'd be
after a
building
few
that
hours,
principle right into
their
the
brain
process.
is no longer in a
We're not just
reactive,
managing the output
alignment-focused
anymore.
mode.
We're
They
managing
can
the
see it with fresh
cognitive rhythm
eyes.
of the work itself.
They're more likely to spot logical
I can see how
fallacies
that would
and
give them
strategic
control back.
misalignments.
So we
They are no
sequence it.
longer just an editor.
We don't let someone
They
get a
become
draft and
true
immediately
critical
dive
thinker.
in. We force a break. That makes so much sense. It's like proofreading your own writing. You always see more mistakes the next day. We'd be building that principle right into the process. We're not just managing the output anymore, we're managing the cognitive rhythm of the work itself. I can see how that would give them a sense of control back. But what about the value of their work? It feels like we're just making the janitorial work more manageable, not getting rid of it. How do I fight that professional identity threat? That's what's really scaring me. I have senior people who are starting to feel like high-paid proofreaders.
That feeling, Jordan, of being a high-paid proofreader is a genuine form of professional grief. They are mourning the loss of the how, the craft, the process, the mastery that once defined their value and gave them purpose. Sequencing the work manages the cognitive load, but it doesn't solve this existential ache. To do that, you have to lead them through a process of identity reconstruction. It means fundamentally shifting their, and the organization's, understanding of where their value comes from. It's no longer about the tangible act of drafting the report. It's about knowing why
how?
the report is
What do
necessary,
I actually do?
what question
I can't
it
just
must
call
answer,
a meeting and say,
who it
"Congratulations,
needs to persuade.
everyone! Your value is now your strategic intent." They'd look at me like I was crazy.
Grace is spot on, and this is where we introduce the next critical leadership intervention: professional identity refocusing. This is not a soft, feel-good exercise. It's a hard-nosed business strategy. If your most experienced, highest-paid employees feel devalued, they will either leave or, worse, disengage and become contributors to the very workslop you're trying to eliminate. Your job is to make this shift in value explicit and tangible through the formal systems of your organization. You don't just say it, you codify it. You start by radically redesigning the artifacts of performance management. Pull up your team's job descriptions. I bet they're full of phrases like writes analytical reports. Strike those out. The new job description for a senior analyst should feature accountabilities like identifies novel strategic questions for analysis, governs the quality and ethical application of automated tools,
Rewriting job
and
descriptions and
mentors
performance
junior
reviews.
colleagues in
That makes
critical
it
thinking.
real. It
You then
codifies
align
the
performance
change.
reviews to
But I'm
reward
still
this.
stuck on the
Stop
practicalities.
measuring
How do
reports
they
filed.
find the time
And
to
when
do
you
all
make
Start
this
those
measuring the
changes to
number of
strategic
flawed
thinking,
strategic
when their day
paths
is
you send a
still
powerful,
filled with verifying
validating
AI
signal.
or the
output?
You're
impact of their
saying,
insights
your
on a
judgment
final
is
business
what we
outcome.
pay you for. Your skepticism is a core competency. Your ability to ask the difficult, nuanced question is infinitely more valuable than a machine's ability to generate a fast, superficial answer. This allows them to rebuild their professional mastery around a new, more durable set of skills: wisdom, contextual awareness, and foresight. It's a promotion from practitioner to director.
That brings us to the final, empowering piece: structured job crafting. This isn't a free-for-all. It's a formal partnership between you and your employee. You explicitly authorize them to become the master of the machine. Their job is to delegate as many repetitive, first draft, and low-value execution tasks as possible to the AI. They become the architect of the prompts, the designer of the workflow. You empower them to aggressively carve out and
Director.
protect their
I
time
love that
for the work
framing.
that
It's
only a human
empowering.
can do.
It's exactly the
Talking
shift
to
my
other
team
humans,
needs.
debating
But I'm
complex
still
ideas,
worried
Exactly.
we're just
And
reacting.
and having the
completely
deep,
The
reframes their
AI
relationship
spits
with
something
focus
out,
needed
and
for
my
true
director
The
innovation.
has
AI
to
is
fix
no
it
longer
or
a rival
redirect it.
threatening their
The
identity.
machine
It
still
becomes a
sets the initial
subordinate,
terms of
a
engagement,
utility they
doesn't it?
consciously and
That
deliberately
problem you
deploy
mentioned,
to
Alec,
offload the
the
drudgery.
early aesthetic
This frees
closure.
their
It
cognitive and
feels like
emotional
we're just
energy
getting
for the
better
work
at
that
working
actually
within the
provides a
machine's
sense of
premature
meaning,
boundaries,
connection, and
not
purpose.
setting our own.
They aren't the AI's janitor anymore, they are its director. And that profound shift in agency is the ultimate antidote to the identity threat.
The messy phase? You mean brainstorming? Whiteboarding? That feels almost archaic now. And how do I defend that? How do I create and protect a messy phase without it looking like unproductive, time-wasting chaos to senior leaders?
That is the final and most critical piece of the puzzle, Jordan. Being a director isn't just about giving better commands on set. It's about controlling the production schedule from the very beginning. This is where we implement the fourth framework, phase-gated human-in-the-loop integration. We have to re-architect the workflow to prevent the machine from setting the terms. The core problem is that teams are collapsing their process, jumping from a vague idea straight to a polished, AI-generated final product. This is where the workslop is born. You must re-establish the messy phase. You defend it by formalizing it as a non-negotiable human cognitive gate. This isn't unstructured chaos. It's a mandatory low-fidelity pre-production stage. Before anyone is permitted to use generative AI to produce a draft, the team must first produce and gain approval on the foundational logic. This could be a simple bullet point outline. It could be a hand-drawn diagram on a virtual whiteboard. The key is that the core strategic narrative, the data architecture, and the logical flow must be vigorously debated, tested, and officially signed off on by the human team in a low-fidelity format. Only after that gate is passed can you unleash the AI to execute on that rigorously vetted human blueprint.
And Jordan, from a psychological standpoint, that messy phase is where the magic happens. It's the space for intellectual friction, for debate, for the aha moments that come from two people challenging each other's
So we don't
assumptions.
just tell them they're directors.
It's where a shared
We
sense
build
of
them a
ownership
studio.
is forged.
We create the
That
writer's
early
room.
aesthetic
We
closure Alec
mandate that the
described
script's
is a
core
form of
logic has to be
conversational
approved
foreclosure.
before we even
The
think
polished
about
draft
filming
shuts
with
down
the
the
AI.
very dialogue that builds
That-
team
That
cohesion
changes
and
everything.
creates deep
It's
mutual
not about banning the
understanding.
tool. It's
When you
about
jump straight to
sequencing
the
it
AI's
intelligently.
output, you are
We force the
outsourcing the
human-led
most meaningful
strategic work
part
to
of
happen
collaborative
first,
work.
in a protected
The
space,
mess is
away
where the
from the
meaning is
machine's
made.
influence.
By protecting that
Job
space,
crafting
you
and
protect
those
your team's
intentional
creative
pauses
spirit and their
suddenly have a
connection to the
dedicated
work
home
and
within
each
this
other.
messy pre-production
Just describe your
phase.
workplace issue,
It all
and
clicks
Alec will
together.
coach you through your decision. You'll get real-time feedback and actionable suggestions, training you to think through and uncover the best course of action yourself.
Upgrade your leadership skills today. Visit consultalec.com Precisely. You are making the implicit explicit. This is an institutional elevation of human judgment. You are structurally reinforcing the fact that your team's primary value is in their critical thinking, their strategic foresight, and their collaborative debate. You are formally positioning the human as the architect and the AI as the high-speed, subordinate construction crew that works from a human-approved blueprint. Your team's role is elevated from mere editing to true intellectual leadership. Judgment becomes the deliverable.
Before we sign off, we want to send a huge thank you to the incredible team at consultalec.com.
Struggling with a tough conversation or a complex team conflict? Management isn't easy. Meet consultalec.com, the next generation of management training.